Hello, everyone, and I'm so thrilled to have Joshilyn Jackson here with us this evening. She, of course, is the author of many best-selling books, but the one that we're going to talk about this evening is Someone Else's Love Story, which is my favorite of all of her books, actually, I think, at least to date. And I know that many of you enjoyed it as well, and I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say about this book, and I know you are too. So welcome, Joshilyn, to the Lowcountry Book Club. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, Susan, thank you so much for choosing one of my titles and inviting me to come and talk to y'all today. That's really cool. I appreciate it.
We are thrilled to have you. So, okay, we will just get right to it. In Someone Else's Love Story, talk to us first, if you don't mind, about setting. I'm always fascinated with setting and, where you set your books. I know that you currently live in the metro Atlanta area, right?
I do. I live inside the perimeter, ITP as we call it. And the book is set in Atlanta and partially in a unnamed small mountain town, but y'all, it's Dahlonega. If you ever get up this way, I've renamed all the cute little shops. I love it. It's a darling little mountain town. Like the mom oldie timey fudge shop, and there really is a little fudge shop up there. So it's very much based on a town that, like, I'm not a very good place writer. So, like, some things come very naturally to me as a writer, and some things I really have to work at. Place I have to work at, which means that I usually write a place I know really well, so I can use memory instead of imagination with landscape.
Right. I wondered if that was Dahlonega, or because I love Dahlonega and I love that town. So, and the fudge shop especially, I thought, I wonder if but that's great. I'm happy to know that. So is this, I think you use a similar setting in several of your books, right? Is this your favorite area to write about because, as you said, you're familiar with it, or?
No, I mean, I said a lot of things in Atlanta because I live here and I've lived in Atlanta since I was 19. Like it's my,
wow.
I've lived inside the perimeter. I've lived outside the perimeter. I've lived in Midtown. I've lived in Little Five Points, all the major neighborhoods I've lived in because I've been here for so long. So, and I'm in love with it. Like I love this city. So, but most of the time I use different little towns that I'm actually familiar with. I like to travel. I like to see places. Sometimes if I want a book to be set somewhere, I'll rent a house there and just go there for 2 or 3 weeks and get a sense of it.
Wow. I do that sometimes with writing retreats, but I've never done it for setting, but that sounds like fun. I think
No, you're right. I mean, it is a writing retreat. Like,
yeah,
the Alma Sisters was set in a little town that was based on a real town I'd never been to, but I wanted the Civil War history. So I got another novelist, Lydia Netzer. We rented a house there and we both worked while I just sort of soaked in the town.
Oh, wow. Fun. That sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, so you explore faith a good bit in this book. It seems to play a good role in various ways, differing faiths. Would you like to talk a little bit about that and your decision to include that, or?
I'm so sorry.
I love that.
Cats were in my room. That is the roaches, my tuxedo cat.
That's hilarious.
Yes, I often write about faith. In fact, usually my novel, I mean, it's not necessarily the book is about faith, but certainly, my characters always have a relationship to faith. It's something I'm interested in as a writer. This book is overtly an Easter book. Like I set out to retell the Easter. There is a virgin birth, there is a death, there is a resurrection. So that was my goal, was to write an Easter story.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I knew it had those pieces, but I hadn't really thought about it as an Easter story. So that's amazing. That's great.
I honestly think that's where the paperback cover came from. It's Easter colors and a flower. So yeah.
That could be. So yeah, and both your colors are lovely, but I confess I have a preference for the first one. It's such a pretty color of blue. Okay, so sort of a segue from that question about faith. There are there were a couple of questions about language, and maybe if you would like to speak to your character's use of language, maybe, and I don't know, I'm just going to leave that wide open and see how you use language for your characters, if it's language that perhaps some of your friends who go to church might, I don't know. I don't know how to even want to phrase that. Talk to me about your use of language, your character's use of language.
Well, I mean, I've long said that I'm a person who writes Christian fiction that no Christian press would touch with a 10-foot pole because I let people talk the way they would talk. And right. I don't like the kind of fiction that presents people the way we wish they were, or, you know, my characters are very flawed, and I am a pretty visceral writer. If you are upset by graphic things, sex or violence, I'm probably not the writer for you, because I do stuff on screen. Right. And I let, like, you know, one of my characters is a cutthroat Atlanta lawyer who grew up in the foster care system. And she talks like a cutthroat Atlanta lawyer who grew up in the foster care system. Right. So, you know, and these are things that I'm pretty familiar with. Like, I think sometimes we think about, like, oh, well, you know, if you're a nice person, you're just not around all that stuff. But, you know, I work with a group called Reforming Arts, and I teach a creative writing workshop, and other English classes inside the prison system here in Atlanta. Like, I feel like you actually, you know, you look at who Jesus ate dinner with. So I don't necessarily feel called to stay in nice places. And I write about redemption. I write about grace. If you're going to write about redemption, you're going to be writing about a whole lot of sin, and you need to not blink. And if you're not comfortable with that, it's completely okay to say, this is not the book for me. It's fine. But I can't change what I want to write or being truthful. Right.
I think I've heard you say before that you considered yourself a Christian writer. And so I knew that, and I had that kind of in my brain when someone mentioned something about language. And I thought, that's an interesting thing, because I think to write characters real, you have to go there sometimes. You have to say things the way those characters speak, and not the way we wish everyone spoke. Or, I mean, we want to keep it real. That's, I guess, what I'm saying. So I think it's fascinating, though, that, you know, you're a Christian writer, and then this is something that was brought up, and I wanted to touch on that, but not belabor it. So,
I would describe myself as devout. We are members. We're very serious about it. But I would also say, like, this is not an uptight church. We're a church who got kicked out of the Baptist convention because we have gay deacons, and we have women ministers who preach, and so you know, when I say I'm a Baptist, people sometimes think that means something different than what it means at my church.
I understand. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about the character of Shandy. Did you get inspiration for that character in any particular place? Does she remind you of anyone you've met? Where did Shandy come from?
No, you know, these people are all people I make up. And my friend Charlotte who's known me since I was this big, describes it the best I've ever heard it described. She says, reading one of my books, it's like I took everybody that we both grew up with, my family, her family, everybody we went to school with, all of our friends, the whole town, and I put it in a Cuisinart and hit that. And then she reads this book, and it's a whole story arc with people she doesn't recognize and events she knows never happened that I have not experienced. But it's also like I've sort of dipped my fingers in that soup in the Cuisinart and done this. Right. So she can see, like, my Aunt Susan's unfortunate haircut from 1987 on this one character, and then the really inappropriate thing my Aunt Susan said at a wedding is in a different character's mouth. So it's like it's all mine, but none of them are me. It's all mine.
I understand.
Yeah. And so Shandy is just, I just thought, like they're very real to me. I think about
Right.
my books are character driven, and the characters
Right.
come first.
Right. I like Shandy. She's an interesting character. And I adore the opening scene of someone else's love story. It may be one of my favorites of all time. It's genius, really. You have these two people with so much going on in their lives. I mean, just overwhelming amounts of things going on in their lives. And then they collide with each other. And it's amazing. How did you decide to open the story this way with the scene in the Convenience Mart? Where did that come from?
Yeah, it opens when they're in a Circle K where they get they get robbed. They don't know each other, but they're in a Circle K when a robbery begins and it turns into a hostage situation. So they're kind of thrown together in. I don't know. I think part of it was like, this is someone else's love story. There is a love story in the book, but it's someone else's. And they also have a love story. And it's hard to explain, but without spoiling anything. But
it's okay. It's okay to spoil because this was the book of the month. And so
they've read it.
The idea, everybody who is going to watch this video, they know that there are spoilers. And they should have read the book if they're going to watch this video.
All right, y'all, if you haven't read the book, this is the time to tap out because we're about to get real. They're not meant for each other. Shandy falls in love with William in that kind of savior way because her life is a mess. He's much too old for her. It's not a thing. So, but I guess I wanted to do, I had a bunch of different things I wanted to do. The first is Jeopardy puts people together that you can't imagine coming together in any way. And I'm a big first line person. I love a good first line. And usually I have all the characters, and then once I have the characters in place, I start thinking about situations, and that line is where it came from. I thought of the line, I fell in love with William Ash at gunpoint in a Circle K. It's just so earnest and so Shandy. And so I thought, that line, the whole story grew out of that line of her just wanting to tell you about how she fell in love with this man in these circumstances.
It's amazing. It's an amazing opening. Okay, so talk to us for a minute about the character of William. He's very interesting.
So William is a geneticist on the autism spectrum. I have written several books with autistic characters. I'm on the autism spectrum. My son is on the autism spectrum. We thought my daughter was ADHD, but the older she gets, the more the more we're thinking she's on the autism spectrum. And, I don't mean that in the, it's very prevalent in my family. I have some institutionalized family members, and I had family members who were nonverbal for years. And so it's something I'm really interested in, especially autists who are mainstreaming. And William is very, very good at what he does. He's brilliant and extremely gifted, but sometimes, especially with autists, you're lucky if you get some of those gifts, but there's also price tags, and William has some price tags. And I think what I wanted to do was write a love story for my son. Was young at the time that I wrote this, and I wanted to write a love story for my son who is brilliant, can do algebra in his head, kind of brilliant.
Wow.
And I was thinking about, he wasn't old enough to be dating or thinking about girls in any way, but sort of being really interested in watching women's beach volleyball when the Olympics came around. That age. Something's happening. I don't understand it. But I wanted to write a love story for him. I was trying to think, what would a love story look like for Sam? I had a really weird, difficult love story that took 7 years because I'm autistic. So, my husband was in love with me for 7 years and was my best friend. And I never would have dated him because he was so nice to me. But we eventually found our way to each other. And so autism had a great deal to do with why it took me so long to understand the kind of relationship I wanted to be in, and that I could be married. And so, it was a love story for Sam. And then Shandy and Walcott's love story is me and my husband's love story in a lot of ways.
I was getting ready to ask you that, if that was the case. That would make sense. That's
big parallels. I mean, it's not exact or one for one.
Yeah.
I mean, at all. I'm just saying, like, in an emotional sense, the relationship
Right.
Shandy has with her best friend Walcott is based on my friendship with my husband when we were both that age.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
he's the best. I mean, this book is very personal for me because of those elements. So, you say it's your favorite. It may well be my favorite too.
Oh, that makes me happy. Okay, so the character of Paula, and you touched on this a few moments ago. Paula is, I mean, she is a firecracker.
I love her.
I love Paula. She's great. And she's great in this book. And then you actually write more Paula in a subsequent book, right?
Paula is the vicious divorce lawyer who grew up hard scrapping in the foster care system, and who is William's best friend. She does not take any prisoners. And she is one of those contentious, strong-willed characters who every time they come into a scene, it just lights the scene up. When I was writing this book, every time Paula would come into the scene, I would write 15 to 25 pages that I would have to cut down to a 3 or 4 page Paula scene. And I thought, oh, this character is going to have her own book. And immediately when this book was over, I started writing the opposite of everyone, which Paula Voss is the opposite of everyone. And so I was real careful in this book, because I knew I would be writing about Paula, to leave some hooks in, like, so you have questions about Paula, but they're not really answered. And she is, and the opposite of everyone doesn't spoil for someone else's love story. William is not around. His absence is explained, because otherwise he would be around. They are best friends. But so you don't hear about any of the events in someone else's love story.
Well, I also enjoyed that book quite a lot. Paula is an amazing character. And if you're ever divorced, Paula is the attorney that you want, for sure.
Oh, Lord. I mean.
Okay. You write great characters. And you touched on Natty a little bit. So Walcott, all your characters are great in this book, but Walcott, was there an inspiration there? You mentioned the parallels. Aside from that, was there some other inspiration there?
So Walcott is my leading man in some ways, in some weird ways. And I'll tell you a secret. And if you've read more than one of my books, I think this will be a shocking secret. I think you'll be surprised by this, anyone who's read more than one of my books. I'm much more interested in writing female characters. I write women's lives. I think if you've read me, you know this. In fact, early criticism for a lot of my books would be, like, people would say, her male characters aren't as fully fleshed out as the female characters. They almost seem to be there just to react to and light up the female characters. To which I say, you think? Do you think maybe I'm saying something about how female characters have been used? Okay, sure, Jan, sure. But yeah, it's true. I tend to go, I'm interested in women's lives. That's what I write about.
Right.
Women in the arts, women in relationship to careers. I do like to have a love story present, but it's not usually, my books usually aren't love stories, but they usually have one going on. That's what I'm interested in. So the way I write a leading man is this. I go to my husband and I take a tiny clipping off of him and I put it in a jar like an avocado pit, and I grow a person. And I just do it the same every time. I find a little piece of him I really like, and they're all like, in one book, Never Have I Ever, if you've read this one, Never Have I Ever, she has a husband named Davis and an old boyfriend from high school who really, really matters. They are night and day. Took a clipping off my husband, grew them both.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to start clipping my husband a few things.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
It just makes me like them.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Well, he's a great character, Walcott. Now, you mentioned that you write, women. The women's characters are the ones you're interested in. Your more recent books, and I notice you have Mother May I, the new one behind you. Your more recent books are more. You're sort of gravitating towards the domestic thriller market. Yes. I mean, that's
Yes.
what it feels like. Is that you think that's a new direction for good? Do you think you'll go
Yes.
back to
I
women's
don't
fiction?
know. It's definitely what I'm doing right now. I'll tell you what happened. I wrote a book called The Alma Sisters, which is very much about the South, and it's really about my family history. I have a weird family history where I am from all parts of the South. Like my mother comes from like Flannery O'Connor characters, and my father comes on two sides from a very Jackson is my name, a large slaveholding family out of Mississippi, the Jacksons of Mississippi. And on the other side of the family, his mom was the descendant of slaves. So I wrote a book about like being this person who comes from all of these places in the South. And it said something about the South that I think I've been trying to say for like 8 books. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's been said better. And I'm not saying I said it perfectly, but this thing I've been trying to say about my homeland, I'm never going to say it better than I said it in the Alma Sisters. Like that's as good as I can say the thing I wanted to say. So I started writing Never Have I Ever, and it just felt different. I didn't know I was changing genres. It wasn't a plan. I just did what I always do, which is I wrote the book I wanted to write. And it was just like after the Alma Sisters, I had closed something and something else opened in front of me that I wanted to do. And I'm really loving it. I love it. It is so fun.
Well, your first book, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Your first book, Gods in Alabama, that felt to me like it had some mystery elements as well, but not the domestic thriller type thing. Where you have
No,
now,
but yeah, it's a murder mystery in it.
Right.
But if you look at all my books, except maybe Between Georgia, there's a murder mystery or the engine of a thriller in it. Like Backseat Saints, it begins with she sets out to kill her husband. In in A Grown Up Kind of Pretty, they dig up a body in the backyard. Like I always have elements of mysteries and thrillers. Even in Someone Else's Love Story, there is, under the domestic drama and the family drama, there's definitely a mystery going on. There are plot twists.
Right.
So I think that, like, I think about these books, they're really not that different. Like Mother May I, Never Have I Ever. If you like my books, I think you'll like these new books too.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree.
It's like this submerged thing that was always present in my books. It's just in the front seat now. My same weird characters, my same women who act instead of reacting. Thematically, I'm still looking at redemption, the transformative nature of motherhood, like all this, how women in the arts, how women relate to the arts and what art looks like filtered through the female experience. Like all the things I've always written about. Faith, I'm writing about, just, you know, with a higher body count.
That keeps things interesting.
Yeah.
No, all your books are very interesting, but I do understand that. And, I think it's great that you can just, gravitate and write the book you want to write. And hey, we'll go along with you. Whatever you're writing, I'm reading.
Thank you. And thanks to William Morrow, who just pivoted and let me do what I wanted to do.
That was, well, why wouldn't they? You write amazing stories.
Oh, gosh, Susan, you're saying
So here are a few questions from members of our group. Diana McGoldrick asked, what was the inspiration for this book? I love the premise. You've touched on this a little bit. Is there anything else about the inspiration for this particular story or these characters that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, Easter was a big thing, wanting to write a love story for my son. Those were my two main things that I wanted to do. And also this was really hard for me, to I wanted to write a book. I had autistic characters before. In The Girl Who Stopped Swimming, the husband whom I love is an undiagnosed autistic. If you're familiar with the markers for autism, probably a lot of people knew that. But I'd never written from an autist's point of view before. And I find the closer something is to me, the harder it is to write. So this is my first published book that had a male narrator in it. Now, Never Have I Ever has multiple narrators, and one is a male in there too. But I'd never. So I like to challenge myself.
I thought it was interesting, the choice you made, and you touched on this when you mentioned the male narrator. So when you're writing from Shandy's perspective, it's like past tense, first person, and then the chapters from William's perspective are like present tense. And it's different. It highlights.
Yeah.
Right.
So I wanted immediacy and distance.
Right.
I think that's correct. Like the best way. Yeah. There's a little bit of a disconnect from his personal life with because it's directed third. I mean, the camera is right on his shoulder, looking through his eye. It's almost first person, but there's that weird disconnect or distance.
Just that barrier. It's interesting. Yeah, it was an interesting choice. I mean, fabulous choice, but interesting. I noticed that when I was reading when I went back to reread, I read the book when it first came out, and then I picked it up so that I could sort of refresh my memory. And I was like, oh yeah, I had forgotten she did that. That was cool. Okay, so Catherine Holm would like to know, did you know the ending when you began writing, or did you learn the story as you wrote?
I never know the ending. If I knew the ending, I wouldn't write that book. Plot to me is candy. I love plot. I know the characters extremely well. I understand the web of relationships between all these people. Then I look at the character or two that's the most interesting to me, and I think about what they love the most, and then I set that thing on fire, and then I see what they do. So there are things that, like all the plot twists, I did not know those plot twists. I went in blind, and they surprised me. If they don't surprise me, how are they going to surprise you? So as these things unfolded, it would surprise me. And then craft comes in where you go, okay, so this is the truth of the world. I now have to go back to page 1 and write all the way through so that this surprise isn't, it has to be that Flannery O'Connor thing where she says it is both surprising and inevitable. Like it has to surprise you, but it has to be set up for. So I'll just go through and work through. And so I rewrite and revise a lot more than I write. Like writing is something I do very quickly and don't really enjoy. Revising, I do a lot and I love it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So you said you decide.
Oh, are you that way too? Are you more of a writer?
Well, I'm an outliner to a large degree, but I think it's probably because I write mysteries and I have to know more about the plot before I start so that I don't go off on a lot of tangents. But I like the rewriting much better than the writing. It's like the writing is like the get it down, but the rewriting, that's where the fun is. The editing.
I wish I could do that. I mean, especially now that I'm writing suspense where there's a definite mystery going on, I feel like I would be a lot faster if I had an outline or I knew where I was going, but I don't. And if I try to, it's just wasted work because within 30 pages, I've had a better idea and I just have to throw that whole outline out. I admire you. I wish I could write that way.
I edit mine quite a lot. I'll start with an outline, but then I go back and I'll change it. It's like if I come up with a better idea, I just change the outline. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's the same process.
Probably very similar.
Well, it is. It's just structurally, which part do you do first and which part do you do second? Like, you have to do the exact same things that I have to do to get through the whole story. You just do that first. I do that while I'm doing the other things. And it might be for you that a character that you don't really understand comes into bloom as you write them. So you're pantsing your characters, but your plot, Well, I never pants my characters. I know them down to the bone, but the plot, I have to let that bloom while I go. So, people talk a lot about plotters and pantsers and stuff, but when you back it out, even though our processes are as individual as a fingerprint, we're all on the same road doing the same things in our own various ways.
Someone else asked that same question. Were you a plotter or a pantser? But I think we answered that one. But I wanted to circle back. You said that when you started, you chose the character that you were most interested in and the thing that was most important to them, and you blew it up. So in this book, was Shandy the character that you found most interesting, or which character was that pivotal character for you with this book?
I mean, sometimes it's more than one character. So it's William, it's the narrators that are the people I'm the most interested in. Shandy's most important thing is Natty. So I put, that's her son who's 3. And I put Natty in a holdup in a convenience store, immediate jeopardy. And William comes pre-destroyed. His wife is gone, so, and he's lost his child. I mean, he lost his whole family in this car accident. So his life came pre-blown up, and it was walking him toward some sort of sustainable survival. This cat is being so bad.
I think it's entertaining. I think it's a nice touch, the cat. Okay, so Catherine also asked, what do you hope readers take from this book?
I mean, my joke answer is the desire to read more of my books. But
I think that's a great answer.
This is the kind of story I like to write. If it's the kind of story you like to read, I got a bunch for you. But I am honestly nothing. Like, I am not interested in you taking anything away. This is a conversation. So with these books, I have a conversation with the themes I'm addressing while I write it. And I guess what I want is to open up avenues for you to have a conversation. And I don't have a takeaway for you. I want you to have your own takeaway. Like, I'm just going to spread this table out, and I hope you come and eat here. But what you pick and choose off that buffet, I don't try to control that. I don't like drawing in lines. Like, I want the story to be complete and have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But I try to be very thematically open. I'll tell you one of my favorite things about someone else's love story. This made me feel so successful. Within a month of it coming out, I had gotten 2 very angry letters. And they came within days of each other. And I was a little upset about the first one until the second one came. And now I've kept them. They're 2 of my favorite things. One of them said, "Dear Ms. Jackson, I'm a longtime fan of yours. I've read everything you've ever written. I will never read another one of your books again. Your conservative, vicious, hateful, oppressive values, where you're just a terrible conservative person, and your politics are so deeply ingrained in this book. I will not read you anymore." The next one said, "Ms. Jackson, longtime fan, read every one of your books. I will never read another one of your books. Your liberal sensibilities, your politics, your crazy liberal politics are so ingrained in this book. You're just preaching at me, and I will not be preached to by you disgusting liberals." Like, it was like, you put them up side by side, it's almost the same letter, and they read the same book.
Wow.
But I mean, I'm just trying to, like, there's a very, very conservative, devout Baptist character in here who is presented very sympathetically and whom I love. There's that's Shandy's mother. Walcott's moms are some Buddhist lesbians who have like an organic farm co-op. So, and they're presented very sympathetically. These are nice people. They're neighbors. They've been good neighbors to each other. So, and there's just all these different ways you can read it. Really, they're just people being people. But it's weird how they would see, like, I could have this character be a sympathetic character, and they just made all these assumptions about. I love that. So take away whatever you want.
I think you accomplished what you set out to accomplish. You definitely made people have a conversation with themselves there, and different conversations. That's great. I love that. Okay, so Carol Henson would like to know, will you ever write more about Shandy?
Well, Carol, the Atlanta cycle was planned to be a 3-book cycle beginning with a novella. So there's a novella called My Own Miraculous, which is Shandy and Walcott before someone else's love story begins. And then after someone else's love story is The Opposite of Everyone, which is Paula's story. And then I planned a 3rd book, which would be Paula. The 2 narrators would be Shandy and Paula. And it would be set at Shandy and Walcott in the week leading up to Shandy's wedding. So I planned it, but I never wrote it, and I don't know if I ever will. If I might come back around to it. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to write a series like that, I don't know. It just didn't happen. Like you get interested in something, else. There's something that feels like I have to write this next. And if I wrote it, it would be exactly the same in that it wouldn't spoil for the other books, and it would be a standalone. So I don't feel any pressure to write it immediately. Mm-hmm. I have other books that connect to each other. Gods in Alabama and Backseat Saints mm-hmm. are very connected books. They actually take place over the same 4 days in time with 2 different narrators who meet 3 times in the course of each book. And in each book, those scenes are exactly the same. The dialogue is cut and pasted, but they mean entirely different things because both of them are lying so much. So, they don't spoil for each other because it's the same 4 days and they only meet 3 times. And the plots have nothing to do with each other because they're both lying. So, and you can read one and not the other ever. Or you can read them in either order. It doesn't matter.
I've read them both, but I think I read them far enough apart that I did not realize that it was the same 4 days. I need to go back and read both those books because I feel like I missed something now because there was a big gap of time between when I read them. Sure. And I think I missed something, but
there was a big gap of time between when I wrote it. So, yeah, I think a lot of people had that experience. People who are my regular readers, mm-hmm. 3 or 4 books later, you don't remember stuff. But it was very fun for me. Like I had a huge wall chart. And now when people want to read Backseat Saints and Gods in Alabama, I tell them to read them backwards. I think it's better to read Backseat Saints first because Gods already existed. So I set up for Gods and Backseat Saints. But in Gods mm-hmm. in Alabama, I didn't know I was going to write Backseat Saints. So I didn't set up for it, but there's like plot hooks and things, questions that get answered in the other book, just really subtle things. But I think it's more fun to read them in reverse order.
I think I may go back and do that. It's interesting because I first met you. You won't remember this, but I remember it vividly. At a bookstore in Greenville, South Carolina, you were doing a signing for Gods in Alabama, your first novel. And I was there on a Tuesday night, I believe it might have been a Thursday, for a writer's group. This is before I had published anything. And I had a writer's group that met in the back room of that bookstore on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was like the first Tuesday and the third Thursday or something like that. And you had a table set up and were signing copies of Gods in Alabama. And I wasn't familiar with the book. I hadn't heard about it or anything. Whatever press had bypassed me. But I saw you sitting there at the table and I thought, oh, this sounds interesting. The title was great. I picked it up. The copy was
for
great.
A while, didn't we?
We probably did because I was so enthralled by you, but I bought the book, and since then I've bought everything that you write as soon as it's published. But if I had not walked in there and just like you were there at the table signing books, and I'm like, oh wow, that's her first book, and she's on tour, and this is so cool. And it was a great book. It captured me right away, and so now I'm an addict. I read everything you write.
Oh, well, thank
But
you.
anyway, it was just a fun thing because for me, I was trying to write a novel, and there you were, you had done it, and so it was fabulous.
That was
So
a
anyway,
long
that's
time
one of
ago,
that's my
Susan.
what.
That was a long time ago, Susan.
It's been a while, yeah. It's
Yeah.
been a while.
Been
It's
a
been a
minute.
couple years, yeah.
Minute. Been a hot minute.
Oh, time flies. All right. So we covered Paula. We talked about Shandy's future that's in doubt. Okay, so tell us about the new book, Mother May I. We touched on it. It's a domestic thriller. Tell us some more about that and tease everybody so that they want to rush out and read it if they haven't already.
Well, it's my second book that has a male narrator in it, Marshall. I just love him. It is the story of a woman named Bree Cabot who was raised kind of working class, rural Southern, and they were middle class, but like just clinging with their fingernails bare, like a single mom, the kind of thing where you have food and you have a place to live and your school is not dangerous and it's fine. But if one thing goes wrong, your whole month is, the car can't break down, just like really insecure. And she's been very upwardly mobile, and she's married. She got a scholarship. She went to college. She married very, very well into old Atlanta money. And so she's one day she's at her daughter's lovely private school watching her two older girls. She's had an oops baby, one of those, like, I've got a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old, and then, oh, look, a baby. But she's happy to, it's a good thing. She loves Robert. And she looks away for 1 minute and he's just gone. He's just gone. And in his place is a note that says, if you want to see your child again, don't call the police, don't call your husband, go home. And this is not a spoiler. This is very early on in the book. Very quickly, she learns that the person who has Robert is another mother. And she doesn't. So there's this weird thing where, and another mother whose background is very similar to hers, and where she was upwardly mobile, this person has been downwardly mobile. And then they really come to empathize with she doesn't, it's not, if you've ever read one of my books, this isn't a straight kidnap and ransom story. This is a story where the past has teeth and it's coming for Brie. So that's, my favorite thing about it is the relationship between the kidnapper and Brie as they come to empathize for each other, and they really understand each other, but each of them is fighting for her own child. So they cannot pull any punches. We're heading for just a conflagration. It is a ride.
I can't wait. And it's an anomaly. Normally I have your book launch day and I'm reading it first thing, but it's been a crazy year. And so I haven't gotten to it, but it's next up and I can't wait. I'm excited.
It has been a crazy year.
Yeah.
We're all doing the best
everyone.
we can.
Yeah, we are. That's a fact. It's been a crazy couple of years.
Yeah.
So tell us what's next for you.
So I'm almost finished with a book called With My Little Eye. A thing I've noticed about me I spilled coffee on myself right before we started, and I keep trying to hide my coffee because I didn't have time to change. I just poured coffee down my front, as I always do. So a thing I've noticed about myself is that a lot of times in a book, there'll be a peripheral thing that I become interested in and then write a book about. Like, sometimes it's a character, like Rosemary Lally in Gods in Alabama comes back later. Or sometimes it's like, this is probably my third autistic character. I've never had a main one before. I touched on it here and there, but then I'll have a little piece of it be in another book, and a whole book will come out of that. So with Mother May I, Bree was an actor. She wasn't an actor. She was a theater major, and she got married right out of college. But she's a theater person. She loves going to the theater. Her daughter, one of her daughters, has the lead in the school musical. Like, she's a theater person, and that is so. One thing you might not know about women on the spectrum: very many of us become actors or writers because women are under so much societal pressure to be empathetic. And so the way we learn to do this is by, I mean, I think to write is to consciously practice empathy. And acting
Right.
is the same way. It's the conscious practice of empathy where you learn what other people are thinking and feeling when their face goes in this shape. And so it's why I have
That
my
is
career.
so interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's really weird. So I got back into theater just a little bit, writing Bree, who has that in her background. And so this book, With My Little Eye, is a working actor, a mom, a single mom. She's a single she's adopted one child because some things did not work out for her the way she hoped. But she has sort of invented her own family that she loves, and she and her daughter are crazy about each other. It's a really good relationship. And she's a working actor, and she has a stalker. So she's a working television actor, which has been so fun to research. And while she's living in LA, she gets this stalker who becomes so serious. She leaves LA. I don't know if you know this, but we film so much here in Atlanta. There's so many production companies working here.
I did know that.
Yeah, she takes a job in Atlanta, even though
Mhm.
she's sworn she'll never go back to Georgia, just to get out of LA. Well, what she leaves behind her follows her, and what she lands in might be even more dangerous. So she's coming back into a past where there's traps and things waiting for her that are very perilous, and it's not like she's escaped this guy anyway. So it's about gaze, GAZE, like the power of gaze and ownership and all that kind of stuff, like how we look at people. And a lot of TV stuff is in there, which is fun, and I do like the love story very much. So anyway, it'll be out next year.
Well, I can't wait. And the name of it again?
With My Little Eye is the name right now, but of course you never know.
All right. Well, that's wonderful. I can't wait to read it. I'm looking forward to it already. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us while you're here?
No, just Susan, thank you so much for doing this. I love when writers support other writers. I'm a huge reader, and I love that you're doing this. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
We're delighted to have you. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you making the time. I know you're busy. Aside from all the writing, you do quite a few audiobooks, right? You narrate your own.
I do. There's my theater background. All but Gods in Alabama, I've read the audiobooks for my books, and I've read for Patty Callahan Henry. I've read for Lydia Netzer. I've read for Mary Beth Mayhew Whalen. I've read for Jen Phillips. These are all writers I admire very much. I'm in this year I had the unique opportunity. I was offered the job to read the book of one. I sometimes teach, or I used to. We haven't. I don't know if it'll ever happen again. But every couple of years, I would teach like a local 6-week writing workshop just through this. It was called the Decatur Writers Thing, and it was to support Decatur Book Fest, which is a huge book fest in my town of Decatur. And it helps. And so I would do that every year or two. And one of my students from the workshop sold her book, Millicent Glenn's Last Wish, and I got to read that. So it's been a joy for me. Like with Shine, Shine, Shine by Lydia Netzer, we won Publishers Weekly Audiobook of the Year. I've been nominated for This Is the Roaches, who's been bothering us this whole time. I've been nominated for an Audie. My degrees are in theater. I started out in theater, wanting to be a playwright and an actor. And so this has been a really nice way to revisit the career I didn't take, and just every year or two do a couple of books and get to be an actor for a week.
That's great. I can't wait to listen to some of that are not your titles. I haven't really embraced the whole audiobook thing yet, but I think,
love them.
Yeah, I think the problem for me is just focus. If it's like if I'm visually focused on something, I have a hard time multitasking. So if having a story in my head while I'm visually focused on something else is somewhat problematic for me, but I'm going to try it because I can't wait to hear one of yours. All right. Well, thank you again. I'm sorry. Did you start to say something?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I mean, I love audiobooks, but whether or not you're reading audiobooks, if you want a book club recommendation,
Yes.
Jen Phillips, she wrote Fierce Kingdom. That's one of my favorite books ever. But her new book, Family Law, I did one of the narrators for that book. It is such a great book club book. It is, it's sort of like a family drama with some elements of like a legal thriller. And it's about a young woman who starts mentoring a young girl. And she's a female lawyer in the 80s. So good.
Okay. And it's called Family Law.
Family Law.
Okay. All right. I'll check that out. I'm sure some of our other folks will. Thank you again so much for being here. And if you get a chance and are able to come into the group, there may be some other questions. Jocelyn's going to try and do that, y'all, but we're not 100% sure if that's going to work out, but we're going to try
I'm going to do it. Somehow
Okay.
I'm so technologically bad.
Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.